Hi, this is Heidi Gimmon from ilovemyshepherd.com with video number 2 of Casting Stones. Today we're going to talk about beginnings and endings. So I have a question for you. Do you have any beginnings that are very memorable for you? Something that really stuck with you that was a beginning in life? I'm not going to define that for you because I want you to be able to define it for yourself. What does that mean to you? Beginning. And then do you have any endings that are memorable for you? Something, someone, a relationship, a time, a season, a place, anything that's an ending. Do you have any endings that are memorable for you too? That's what we're going to be talking about today is beginnings and endings. So brainstorm this in your group too after you or in your notebook by yourself, whatever you're doing. Think about what has a beginning and ending. Hopefully those two questions bring to mind, what beginnings are memorable for you, what endings are memorable for you. You might jot down a few things. Feel free to pause the video and all that good stuff or come back to this later with your viewer guide. You can print out from ilovemyshepherd.com /studies available is where you can find that. Or it is in the listening notes, a link to that too on YouTube. So brainstorm what has a beginning and an ending. What do those things mean and where do you see beginnings and endings around you? Maybe play a game. Think of as many as you can or split up into groups and do it. Whatever works. But we just want to think about, I think we so often have these abstract concepts in our life, and something beginning and something ending are, while concrete, the words themselves are slightly abstract. What do they mean? And where do we see it in our everyday life and in reality? So today we're going to do 3 segments. We're going to do finding beginnings and endings, and we'll look at our Ecclesiastes passage. And then we're going to do God's place in beginnings and endings. And then we're going to do our place in beginnings and endings and see where the pieces kind of fit together. So we'll get grounded in, what God is doing, his definition of time and things like that, and then move on to our own, where are we in this and what is he doing in the midst of it? So we'll work through that. So first, go through or turn to Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8, which is our theme passage. Maybe you have a bookmark there. Maybe you can find it really easy by this point because you've been working through some of it. If not, you will eventually, I promise. But I have it, I'm going to actually have it on my computer screen today because my big blue Bible is what is it called that? Missing in action, MIA. I got to find my big blue Bible. So I'm going to do it with my screen today, and you can get it on your phone too. Use the Bible app, the ESV Bible app or Bible Gateway or anything like that. I am not advertising a particular one. Just download a Bible that works for you. So Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So what do you hear in there of beginnings and endings? Maybe take one color of pen and circle where you hear beginnings, and then take another color pen and circle where you hear endings. Some of them are really clear cut, and then other ones, I don't think it's as clear cut as we would like it to be, is it? Some things aren't as linear as a begin and to end. So, but just go through that and that'll might maybe help you focus on the passage for just a minute to get you just sitting with it and letting God soak that into your brain. So again, what impactful beginnings have been in your life? and look at that Ecclesiastes passage and see, where that speaks. Like, where do you see the word at work in your own life? Have you had a time to seek? Have you had a time when there was a time to weep, a time to laugh? Where in your life is a time to be born and a time to die? All those things. I think it's very much for our life. So connect it to the passage, those memories you have. Or if you weren't able to think of any, maybe that will help you think of some. So God's place in beginnings and endings is really interesting because beginning and ending is one of his names. It's one of his very names. And I just love it. I love when God says, I am the resurrection and the life. Like his very name is resurrection. Or I am the way. He just makes it very clear. And I love when he takes a verb and makes it into a title, a noun for himself and for us. It's like a beautiful thing. So one of his names is Alpha and Omega. And I think the only way we can really understand time and God's place in time, just like everything else, is by understanding God's character. And so his names is one way we understand his identity and his character. So Alpha and Omega, those are Greek words for beginning and end. I am the Alpha and the Omega. So for that, let's turn to Revelation 22, verse 13. Revelation 22, verse 13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. It couldn't say it more clearly, right? So while we talk about time and while we talk about kind of some more linear ideas and even the incompleteness of that, we have this groundwork of the fact that God is beginning and end. Whatever else happens, however else we understand time and our brains can wrap around things, we come back to the fact that God is all and through all, and he works in our time, our place, but he is everywhere. He's omniscient, omnipresent. He's everywhere. He knows everything. He is very engaged in our lives. And I think that sometimes so many misunderstandings, especially with time, come in by believing that he is disengaged. And that is not true because his name is beginning and end, and that also means everything in between then. And so that basic understanding of God is really going to change our perspective. Okay, the next verse is John 1:1 and 2. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So the Word is Jesus. This is the beginning of the Gospel of John and the beginning of Jesus' incarnation on the planet as the baby Jesus and all that he walked through. But I love how it says, okay, yep, he's coming to earth. Here he is now, world, angels rejoice, away in the manger, no crib for a bed, all of that good stuff. But verse 2 tells us he was with God in the beginning. So this isn't really the beginning. That's the beginning. We can go way back. And guess what? Our beginning of creation, Genesis 1:1, one of the reasons I don't have that as a verse is because that's not the beginning. God was there before that. Christ was there before that. They made plans before the creation of the world. And that's a really powerful, just awesomely beautiful thing. So we know that God doesn't exist in our timeline then. Like we see things in a very narrow focus, and the Bible says we're going to last 80, 90, maybe 100 years tops. But God is eternal. He's forever. And so we know that he isn't stuck in our timeline, I guess. He isn't dependent on it. I think that God created time for us, it is from him. He created it for our benefit. He doesn't need it, just like so many other things in this world. He doesn't need it, but he did create it for us. And that's a powerful thing. So that we know that God creates for our benefit. He doesn't create for our upheaval. He doesn't create so that we're stressed. That's not in his character. He creates for our benefit. So then time isn't evil. It's not evil in itself. The fact that we feel like so often we're running out of time, God created it for our benefit. I think he created it for our boundaries, for our Sabbath, and our understanding of work and rest and the joy of work and rest. And I think he created it for our understanding so that I'm just not sure we could function without time, without understanding, that there's a limited amount of it for us, and until Jesus comes back again. And I don't think we would see eternity with the same value without time. And so he uses time to teach us. He uses it, and just like Queen Esther, for such a time as this, he uses us in our time and place, but he also uses that time to mold us, whatever century we're in, whatever. Has anybody ever wanted to be born in another century? Can you think of the time you would like to be born? Otherwise, what time you'd like to be? Sometimes I think like the Jane Austen era in England would be like really cool with their pretty empire waisted dresses and dances and stuff. And then I think, oh my goodness, they didn't have bathrooms in their homes and running water, Some people think that, ancient Egypt, or there's just all these like glamorous ideas of time. And I firmly believe God put us in our time and place for a specific purpose, and you are there for a specific purpose. And so in that way, God also cares for time. He cares for, oh, there's my doggies. Shh, doggies! Doggies! Shh, lay down. Sorry. They're really cute, I promise. But he cares for time in the fact that he moves it along, right? He has plans and purposes, and he's caring from one generation to the next. God very much works generationally if you look at scripture. And so he is caring for the people, but I think he's also caring for this bigger time and place and everything that's before him that he has created. Whew, that's like mind-blowing ideas right there. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from beginning to the end. God tells us what he wants to tell us when he wants to tell us. And I mean, he gives us the complete word, and that's an awesome thing, but that's how that works, where we understand something suddenly that we didn't see before when we just read the Bible story for the 80th time. He has a plan, he has a plot, and he will make it beautiful however he's going to do it. And so that's a great promise in Ecclesiastes 3:11. So what has God made beautiful in your time that you didn't see in the beginning, but eventually you were able to see? What has God made beautiful in your life? Often what has happened to us in the past and what will happen in the future is the greatest sources of worry for us, right? Like, will we be able to pay our bills? Or will we, someone uncover, our rebellious youth or something, or this thing that we did when we weren't thinking clearly or weren't making good choices, whatever. So in that way, I think time is wrapped up in so much of our shame and our guilt and everything, and just really brings a lot of worry into our lives. So today, when we look through our place in beginnings and endings, we'll be firmly grounded in the way God uses it for our benefit. Just like that Ecclesiastes passage that said, he has made everything beautiful in its time. So whatever it is, even when it causes angst and worry and anxiety and all of this stuff, we know that he is doing something with it. So that's part of our foundational understanding of time. And we will also collect a couple tools to work through that worry. So like that we can use, like when we are like, am I going to be able to pay the bills next week? Will God provide for me? When we're asking those difficult questions like that, then hopefully these passages are something we can return to. That's one reason we memorize scripture, even though I'm terrible at it. It's not my gift. Because then they well up in our hearts and our minds when we need them most. So let's turn to Isaiah 6:8 through 11. Isaiah No, I lied. Isaiah 46, 8 through 11. Isaiah 46, 8 through 11. We're going to work through a few gems, just some little gems in this passage to help us understand beginnings and endings and how we interact with time as we go through life, as we go through our days. Remember, God controls time. It doesn't have power over us. Sometimes I think it really feels like, especially as we get older, that time is getting away from us. It seems so limited, and then it's just... again, a real source of anxiety. But God always controls us and controls time. And that's important to remember. He's in charge of that time also, not just of the plans and the plan for salvation. He is in charge of time itself. Okay, Isaiah 46, 8 through 11. And just listen for some words about time, Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done, saying my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purposes. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed and I will do it. I like the end. I will do it. So point number 1 from Isaiah and our place in time is we were made with stamina. We were made with stamina. Why do I say this? Time requires stamina, right? I mean, it's just reality that our bodies are decaying and we get older and things start to fall apart. And even when you're young, we only have a certain amount of energy, but things need to get done. Yeah, and life needs to happen, right? And kids need to be cared for, and like friendships, require time. Even those things we really enjoy require time. And so time then requires some stamina, some energy to it. And this will be imperfect for us. Like we need rest. But we were also created for rest. God gives us times of rest. And sometimes that takes even energy to figure out how to rest, right? But because of Christ Jesus, it makes it possible. Time requires stamina, but Jesus makes it possible. Look real closely at Isaiah 46, verse 8. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. We're the transgressors, right? I mean, we all are. We're all sinners saved by grace. Like none of us, God isn't talking to a select group of people here who really mess up. No, he's talking to all of us. And I love that it says, remember this. That's even an essence of time, memory, the fact that time gathers into our brains and sticks as memory, right? Experiences and stuff and sensory stuff all stores together to make memories. And those things, part of what they do is help us stand firm. We can look back and recall what God has done. We can recall what we have been through, what God has brought us through. We can recall the Bible stories we've been taught. We can recall relationships we have. There's so much to recall. And he is faithful. It really reminded me of Exodus 14, when Moses is given the tablets of the 10 Commandments. So we're going to read Exodus 14, 13 through 18. Turn to that, Exodus 14, 13 to 18. And just hear the way Moses talks to the people. And imagine like God is talking to us. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord will bring you today." The deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. I lied. This isn't the 10 Commandment one. We have that coming up in a little bit. This is the Red Sea, which you'll see. The Egyptians you see today, so they're like looking back across the Red Sea that's wide open, and they see the Egyptians coming. You will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on, to move forward, to keep it going." That's one thing time does. "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, and I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So one thing God is telling the people is look to salvation. So when we recall, when we remember, we have a salvation helmet, right? The helmet of salvation that we have on our head. So that's how we understand things. We see salvation. And so the Israelites here, they're looking back and they see doom, right? They see the chariots coming after them. Instead, God says, look forward and see salvation. See what I'm going to do because of what you know I have done. And that's a really cool way that God connects time, the past, the present, and the future. Also, I think it points out the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. There is some glory to be had for God in the passage of time, when things take time. He might be doing it for many different reasons, and things might be happening for many different reasons, and the pieces fit together. We don't see it. However, glory is usually a byproduct, at the very least, if not the reason. Glory for God is connected to the passage of time with things, to seeing things happen over time. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. We want God to have glory. Sometimes we don't want to suffer for it. Sometimes that's not what we're looking for, or to be scared or whatever. But it is cool when we can look back and be like, look at how that glorified God. That's a really cool thing. So next we are made to recall and remember. Remember it said recall it. Let's look at Isaiah 46 verse 9 again. We're going to keep coming back to this Isaiah passage. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. So this is what I was talking about. Reminds me of the 10 Commandments. When the law is written down, the promises of God really are written into that law then. Yes, it says, you shall have no other gods before me. But the inverse of that is, I am your God. I am going to fight for you. I'm going to be there for you. And so when we think of the law of God written on tablets, let's think of those inverses too, not just don't do this, don't do this. No, it's also those promises of God in it. So I'm not going to read this section because it's a little bit long, but you can look up Deuteronomy 5 verses 1 through 7. And look at how God gives us the commandments to recall what he has done. That's what he tells the Israelites. So here's the commandments. Recall all that I've done for you. And I think sometimes in order to muscle through, to get to that sanctification place where we can hear the commandments, begin to have life change, life transformation, we need that recollection, don't we? We need to know that God is at work in that way. It also causes us to recall his forgiveness. When I look at the law, when I look at how I messed up, do not covet your neighbors, blah, 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 blah. Do not steal, do not kill, do not commit adultery. Don't give false testimony against your neighbor. All those things. It makes me recall my failure, but it also makes me recall his forgiveness, that I live in that. That's where I live, is with his forgiveness. And again, that's a beautiful thing. He makes everything beautiful in its time. So the last two, we are made to declare. We're made to declare. Keep going. Isaiah 46 verse 10, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purpose. One thing I think this tells us is that, again, first of all, end from the beginning, declaring the end from the beginning. So we point to the beginning, but we also point to the end, and that there is a beginning and an end to time, that God is working in eternity, but we are constricted. And without him, what hope is there? We need him for time to keep going, for him to come again, and for that new creation to exist. Otherwise, we do not have hope after death. And that can be devastating. We want to declare that, the hope that he gives us when we think about end in particular, right? When we think about end. But then also, I think we could ask ourselves this question on a daily basis, and this might change the way we see things. What is God doing here and now? What is God doing here and now? So often that's the way Jesus existed, is in the very present, when you look at the way he encounters people and the way he talks to people. But this passage says, My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish my purposes. So what is God accomplishing? He's accomplishing things this day, and he's accomplishing things long term. But what is he doing right here, right now? I think that draws our attention to who he is, and then we declare it. We say, here he is, right here. It keeps us in the present. We can recall and declare and connect it to the past. This is something he did here, but how does that change things now? If we're just looking back like, remember when it was really great? That's nostalgia. And the thing about nostalgia is it doesn't help share the faith at all. It's great, but how does that connect here and now? Because that's what God is having us declare, that he is here now. He worked then, he's still working now. Otherwise, it's not very hopeful, is it? We can see his faithfulness then across the timeline. And that's a really powerful thing, especially for generational sharing of faith within our churches, within our communities, and within our homes. So the last one is, he does not delay to come to us. He does not delay. This is a big thing. It feels a lot like time is delayed, like it's just running ahead of us and God is coming late to the party. You're showing up late, God. How often do we feel like that? I think maybe Job said something similar in not so many words. Isaiah 46 verses 12 and 13. We'll wrap this up. Listen to me, all you stubborn of heart, you who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. I love that, those three words, I bring near. How does God bring himself near to us now? How is he working in your time and place? Again, when we wait, he is near. When we struggle, he is near. When we open his word, he is near. When we gather together, when we go to the Lord's Supper, when we bring people to be baptized before him and support one another, when we talk through each other's marriage struggles, when we sit and have coffee with our neighbor and talk life and what God is doing in it, he is near. When we tuck in our kids at night, when we lay down on our pillows, and when we encounter death, others or our own, he is near. One day he will be near in a way that we can't even fathom, and we can't even begin to comprehend. He's near in the beginning, right? Before time began, before our concept of time began, before the earth was formed. He's there in the end. He's near when he comes again. We will see him face to face. We will sing with the archangels, holy, 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 all that stuff. But he's here in the middle every day too. He's near. He brings himself near to us. That's a beautiful thing. He makes everything beautiful in his time. I'll see you next time.